Hello, it is July 6th, 6:41 p.m., and I'm about to present my research uh, about Jewish diplomats and their identity. Now, this is a topic that is very interesting to me and what I've chosen to write my seminar paper about for Moran Yarchi's class, Conflicts, Public Diplomacy During Conflicts. This is my first shot, so maybe I'll choose it. Okay, here we go. Let me share screen. Here we go. Share. Okay, so my presentation is about, as I'm sure you can tell if it loads. Let's see. And here we go. Navigating loyalty. Jewish diplomats and the weight of identity, particularly Jewish identity. Whoop. More on Yachi, Public Diplomacy During Conflicts by myself, Mayor Cohen. Okay, so what is the question? What is the research question that I'm going to dive into through literature, qualitative interviews, so on? The question is, how do Jewish foreign diplomats navigate expectations tied to their identity? And how does this affect their work and sense of loyalty? I know it's a loaded question on the surface. There's a lot of words in there, but as we break it down, it's going to start to make a lot of sense. Essentially, I'll try to explain this right now. We're focused on Jewish foreign diplomats, so not Israelis, individuals who are Jewish who serve as diplomats for countries that are not Israel. We're going to focus on how their Jewish identity can oftentimes affect their decision making, people's perception of their decision making, and especially their ties to Israel. So, why is this study significant? So, as you might think, Jewish diplomats are at the literal crossroads of personal identity and professional duty. A lot of times, Jewish people have some allegiance to Israel or have family in Israel, or have loved ones in Israel, care a lot about the well being of Israel. But that oftentimes can operate at the crossroads of personal identity and professional duty. Secondly, they face assumptions and expectations from Israel, their own governments, and global actors. And understanding their experience reveals how identity and diplomacy intersect in practice. Here's literature review. I analyzed lots of literature, particularly these four books slash articles: Emmanuel Navon's Star and the Scepter, Alan Dowdy's Israeli Foreign Policy and the Jewish Question, Shmuel Sanders Between Isolation and Integration, Ephraim and Bar's Jewishness, and Israeli Foreign Policy. Essentially, these four books go into a lot of different things regarding Jewish diplomats and how they balance external expectations. And as you can see on the bottom, the influence of Jewish identity and how it's declining and national interests dominate. And all these are very related to my research, and you can pause it and just check out some of the stuff that I wrote, so I don't need to go square by square. But lots of very interesting, well-written literature on this subject, as there's been lots of Jews in diplomatic positions, not even in Israel. Okay, so the research gap. So there's all this research about it, as I said before, so why do I need to research it? A few studies explore how Jewish diplomats personally, on a personal level, experience these identity-related tensions and how it affects their decision making. So what's my hypothesis? It's that Jewish diplomats face dual expectations. Israel may see them as natural allies who share its interests because they're Jewish. Home governments, such as the United States of America, would expect them to remain neutral and completely independent. Secondly, their Jewish identity can be both a bridge and a burden. If I've learned anything in my life, it's that I'm able to leverage my connections, a lot of them through the fact that I'm Jewish and I can work with other Jews. Jews have always been historically great at helping other Jews. It can open doors, it can build trust, but it can also raise suspicions about divided loyalty. Are you more loyal to your Jewish friends or to your work? There's lots of questions within that. Historical examples of how Jewish diplomats have had to balance identity with professional duties. Now, not only is there lots of literature about this subject, there's lots of real world, practical, actual happened historical experience of this subject, such as Henry Kissinger's internal strife about his Jewish identity and his American appearance. He wanted to appear as a American first and a Jew second. And even as recent as Anthony Blinken, the US Secretary of State during the Israel-Hamas war. So what's my methodology? The approach that I took was qualitative interview on Zoom, as I'm in Israel and the people I've interviewed in America. And the participants vary. To start, Jonathan Katz, who's a senior director at the Brookings Institution, wears many hats for them, incredibly talented man. Steve Rabinowitz, who was the former White House media director for Bill Clinton's administration, a fascinating man who I had a long discussion with. The third is an anonymous former CIA field operative. I'll add now that he's not Jewish, but he has lots of interesting insight into identity as a whole and Jewish identity included in that. And then a friend of mine, Max Makovsky, who's a young Jewish diplomat working for NATO through the US, but he works for NATO. which is really interesting. I've got great information. Now, keep in mind, I know this is just a beginning to my research, so I will have plenty of more information in my final paper. This is just an introduction of what I'm going to discuss. So within that is the identity and diplomacy, perceived expectations from Israel, experiences of loyalty concerns, generational perspectives, and the analysis, essentially the thematic coding of these interview transcripts, four of these interviews, all which I've already done and transcribed. So now we have this new research question. It was a lot of words at the beginning. I've done some explanation. And what do we have now? How do Jewish diplomats manage these dual pressures and maintain professional balance? They have allegiances all over the place. They have people that expect all kinds of things from them. What are the key themes? What's the thematic coding that I've done? I've transcribed each one of these four interviews. They're 10 pages long. And what are the quotes that I'm getting that are aligning this hypothesis of mine, this research of mine? Spoiler alert, there's a lot. Identity is inescapable. Jewish identity shapes how diplomats are seen, sometimes opening doors, sometimes creating obstacles. Now, this was a quote from the CIA agent that I interviewed. Everything about you is telegraphed. They know you're Jewish before you say a word. It colors everything. Now, in this instance, that doesn't mean just Jewish. You could be Catholic or Muslim, and that would also color everything about you and what people expect of you. But in this case, this was about Jewish diplomats. Now, interesting quote from Max, who says, "I'm effectively undercover. I want people to perceive me as American," feeding into the theme that identity is inescapable. The second key theme is Israel's unspoken expectations. Israel often assumes Jewish diplomats are natural allies, creating this subtle pressure and these expectations. Quote, "There's a perception that if you're Jewish, you must support Israel, or you're betraying something." From Jonathan Katz, who's a senior director for the anti-corruption and democracy at Brookings Institution, who's worked with all kinds of different groups and think tanks all over the place. And he's not shy about his Judaism. Jonathan Katz, people know that he's Jewish, and that influences what people expect from him. Another quote from Max, "Israel would find out quickly if a Jewish diplomat doesn't align with its goals." A very interesting quote specifically to me. I'm interested in diplomatic career. If I don't always agree with Israel's goals and their expectations, Israel finds out quickly about that. Keep a database on who agrees with them and who doesn't. That's not something that I would be surprised with. And I've learned throughout my research that that is probably true. And third, dual loyalty concerns. Now, this is a very jam-packed key theme. As I said before about Henry Kissinger, we can talk for hours about that, about how that impacted his career. But this is a quote from Steve Rabinowitz, who writes, "My only client was the US government, but not approaching it from a Jewish point of view was impossible." From Steve. Now, his job was a media director from the US for the US government. Now, of course, most of the things that Steve did didn't revolve around Israel. He did go on trips to Israel, but his perspective, his identity affected everything he did, no matter what, because that was who he was. That's his identity. So, preliminary conclusions. Now, I understand these bullet points may seem a bit weak, but because I'm going to get much more into them into my actual research and seminar paper. But Jewish identity remains central in diplomatic work. Identity can build trust, but it can also raise suspicion. Israel's expectations add subtle pressure, and generational differences shape how identity, specifically Jewish, is managed. There's a lot of information in this research, and I've really just barely scratched the surface with this very short presentation. But my point is that there is incredible research to be done, and there is incredible research that has been done. And I'm excited to write this paper. I have a lot to work with, and I hope to interview some more people. These are some of the themes, the key themes from four people with very different backgrounds, and I am genuinely excited to continue this research. So thank you very much. Moran, if you're seeing this, I really enjoyed your class and public diplomacy program, and be in touch.